What kind of person laughs at their own customers? That's what Mason Zeller kept asking himself as he stood frozen with a fork in his hand and a nearly untouched salad in front of him. The two waiters didn't know who he was. They thought he was just another quiet middle-aged guy grabbing a solo lunch at a corner booth. But Mason owned the place. All 19 of them. He hadn't started in restaurants. He was a dishwasher in his teens, then a cook, then a manager. He built his first diner at 27 with a loan and a beat-up food truck he sold for scrap. Over the years, he turned that one diner into a respected chain, 19 locations across 3 states. But lately, something fell off. Complaints had started trickling in about the downtown Elm Street location. Nothing major: slow service, cold food, long waits. Mason didn't think much of it at first. Then a regular customer emailed corporate and mentioned the staff looks like they're being held hostage, and some of the waiters act like they're doing you a favor just by showing up. That's when Mason decided to go see it for himself. He had met most of the frontline workers at the newer branches. With so many locations and a growing corporate team, it was impossible to know every face. The Elm Street location had gone through 2 managers in a year. The current one, Dan, was hired 6 months ago. Mason had only seen his resume and a Zoom interview during final approval. So he went in alone.
No cameras.
No assistant. Just him in a faded hoodie, jeans, a ball cap, and glasses. He shaved his beard and wore contacts instead of his usual frames. He looked nothing like the suited-up man in all the training videos. He came in during lunch hour, sat in the corner booth, and waited. No one greeted him at the door. He stood for a few minutes before deciding to seat himself. The place wasn't packed, but it definitely wasn't slow. 4 servers were on the floor, including 2 who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. A young woman eventually dropped a menu on his table without a word. Her name tag read Tasha. She didn't smile, didn't even look at him. Mason stayed quiet, observing. He ordered a simple salad with grilled chicken and a water. Tasha nodded and walked off, not writing anything down. 15 minutes passed. No drink. No food. Mason didn't complain. He wanted to see how they treated a regular paying customer. That's when he heard it. 2 waiters stood behind the half wall near the server station, just out of sight from most customers, but still within earshot. One of them, a tall guy with slicked back hair and a deep voice, was laughing softly. "Did you see that lady at table 5? The one who asked if we use real butter? Like, no, Karen, we use unicorn tears." The other, shorter, stockier guy snorted. "Don't forget table 7. That dude with the glasses who ordered the chicken salad? Looks like he hasn't smiled since '98. Probably writes Yelp reviews in his sleep." They both laughed. Mason froze. He didn't care they were joking. He cared about the tone, the contempt, the fact that they were mocking people who came in here, spent their money, trusted them to serve a hot meal with some basic respect. He looked around. Table 5 was an older woman eating alone, carefully cutting into her pancakes. Table 7 him. Mason clenched his jaw. He didn't say anything. Not yet. He took a bite of his now cold salad and waited. Another 10 minutes passed. The 2 waiters, still whispering and chuckling, barely moved from their post. Tasha was nowhere to be seen. A young man in a green apron hustled between tables, clearly overwhelmed. He kept apologizing to customers, picking up slack that wasn't his. Mason flagged him down. "Excuse me, what's your name?" "Elliot," the kid said, breathless but polite. "I'm sorry about the wait, sir. We're a little short today." Mason raised an eyebrow. "How come?" One of the waiters, Bryce, called in sick. "But honestly, we're always kind of short. Management's been cutting hours." Mason nodded slowly. "Thanks for your help." "No problem, sir. I'll get you a fresh salad if you want." Mason shook his head. "No need. You're doing great." Elliot gave a tired smile and jogged off. Mason sat back, tightened his hoodie around his shoulders, and watched. He saw customers waiting for drinks that never came. He saw the two waiters, Travis and Joel, according to their tags, laughing again, this time at a dad who was trying to calm his fussy toddler. He saw Tasha finally return, texting behind the counter. And through it all, Elliot kept moving, clearing tables, refilling drinks, even offering to-go boxes with a quick joke to lighten the mood. Mason didn't come here to fire anyone. But sitting in that booth, surrounded by bad attitudes and cold food, he knew he couldn't walk out and pretend he hadn't seen what he saw. He pulled out his phone, opened the employee directory app, and scrolled to Dan, the store manager. He tapped call. "Hey Dan, it's Mason Zeller," he said flatly.
"Yeah."
"The owner. I'm at your location on Elm Street. I need you here.
Now."
Dan showed up 23 minutes later, slightly out of breath and visibly irritated. He didn't recognize Mason, just saw an unassuming man in a hoodie waiting near the front counter with a neutral expression. "You the guy who called?" Dan asked, glancing at his watch. Mason nodded.
"Yeah, I'm the guy."
"You said you were a customer?" "I said I needed you here. And you came. So, let's make use of the time." Dan folded his arms. "Look, if this is about a late lunch or something undercooked, we've had a rough shift. It's not usually like this." Mason stepped aside and gestured toward the dining area without a word. Dan followed his gaze. Half the tables still hadn't been cleared, a few customers looked annoyed, and one pair had already left their food mostly untouched and were paying the bill with tight smiles and quick glances toward the kitchen. "I want to see how you run this place under pressure," Mason said. Dan narrowed his eyes. "Why would you?" "Because I own it." Mason pulled off his hat and glasses. The shift in Dan's face was immediate. His posture snapped upright, eyes widened, jaw slightly clenched. "I'm Mr. Zeller. I didn't know you were coming in." "That was the point." Dan opened his mouth, then thought better of it. "I sat here through your lunch rush. I watched two of your senior waiters ignore customers, mock them out loud, and let one kid run the floor by himself." "I'll talk to them," Dan said quickly. "They're just sometimes they blow off steam. It's not personal. I'm not interested in excuses. I'm here to see the truth." And I saw it. Mason turned and walked back toward the kitchen. Dan hesitated, then followed. The moment they stepped through the swinging doors, the noise of clattering pans and shouted orders hit them. The kitchen wasn't dirty, but it was chaotic. Two line cooks worked in silence, heads down and shoulders tense. A third cook leaned against a prep table, scrolling on his phone with a blank expression. "No head chef?" Mason asked, scanning the scene. "We've been rotating. The last one quit 2 weeks ago," Dan admitted. Mason eyed the cook on his phone. "And him."
"Daryl."
"He's supposed to be on break. He's not clocked out." Dan didn't reply. Mason stepped toward the line. "Who's running Expo?" The younger of the two active cooks looked up briefly. "Nobody's been doing that. We just been passing plates out when they're ready." Mason turned to Dan. "That's why food's going cold." "I can fix it," Dan said. "We just haven't had the staffing to." "You had enough staff to keep 2 waiters parked at the server station for 40 minutes. Dan flinched slightly. Mason walked back out to the floor. A table near the window raised a hand, an older gentleman trying to get a refill. Mason nodded and grabbed a pitcher from the counter, pouring it himself. As he turned, he caught sight of Travis and Joel again, this time leaning against the side wall, watching a mother struggle to push a stroller past a tight booth. "She should have stayed home if she can't handle her kid," Joel muttered. Travis chuckled. "Yeah, don't bring your mess into my section and expect service." Mason stepped up behind them. "Your section?" They turned. Joel's face blanched. "Sir, can we help you?"
"No."
"But I can help you." Mason pointed toward the exit. "You're done. Both of you." "What?" Travis barked. "You can't fire us. I can. And I just did." Dan hurried over, his voice low and urgent. Maybe we give them a warning. No, Mason cut in. They've been disrespectful, lazy, and actively hostile toward customers. That's not who we are. He turned to the two waiters. You've been mocking families, ignoring tables, and dragging this entire shift down while one kid tries to cover for all of you. There's no coming back from that. Joel opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Travis scoffed and walked out without a word. Joel hesitated, then followed. Dan stood there, stunned. That's going to leave us short. You were already short. Now you're just honest about it. Mason walked over to Elliot, who was wiping down a booth. Can I talk to you for a second? Mason asked. Elliot looked surprised but nodded.
Sure.
They stepped aside near the drink station. You've been the only one keeping this place from falling apart today, Mason said.
Why?
Elliot gave a tired shrug. I don't know. I mean, someone has to. I like the job, but it's been rough lately. People quit, hours get cut, and some shifts I'm the only one who actually shows up on time. How long have you been here? About 7 months. Anyone ever offer to promote you? Give you more responsibility? Elliot laughed under his breath. Dan said I wasn't manager material. Said I need to be more aggressive. Mason raised an eyebrow. You don't strike me as passive. I just try not to make things worse. Mason nodded slowly. Would you stay if things changed? Elliot hesitated. If it was fair?
Yeah.
I like the customers. Just hate how the place is run. Mason clapped a hand gently on his shoulder. Change is coming. Starting now. He turned to Dan, who had been hovering nearby. Elliot's your new floor lead. Effective immediately. Train him, support him, and take your cues from him during service. He's been doing your job better than you have. Dan's face twitched. You're serious? Completely. Mason walked past him and stepped back into the kitchen. Daryl was still leaning against the prep table. You're done too, he said flatly. Clock out and don't come back. Daryl looked confused. What did I do? You didn't do anything. That's the problem. As Daryl left, the other two cooks exchanged looks but kept working. Mason turned to them. You two okay staying for the dinner shift if I bring in backup? One of them, a short woman with a tattoo sleeve, nodded. Yeah, if someone actually runs the line right. You will, Mason said. What's your name? Maria. Maria, you're running Expo for the rest of the day. I'll cover the rest. She blinked. I've worked the line before. He grabbed an apron. The next few hours were a blur. Mason moved between the kitchen and the floor, helping where he could. Elliot handled the customers with quiet confidence, checking in, directing the one remaining server, and even jumping onto the line to help plate during a rush. By 8 o'clock, the dining room had cleared. The place looked better. Still tired, still stretched but cleaner, calmer, and with a sense of order that had been missing all day. Mason sat at the back booth again, this time with a coffee. Elliot joined him, wiping his hands on a towel. You didn't have to do all that, Elliot said.
I did.
Because I let it get this far. You think it'll stick? Mason looked around. If it doesn't, that's on me. He stood up. Tomorrow, a team from corporate's coming to reset this location. New hires, retraining, full cleanup. You'll be the point person. Elliot stared, stunned. Seriously? You've earned it. Mason left without fanfare, walking out into the cool night air. He didn't need a thank you. He just needed to make sure this never happened again. The next morning, Mason was already on site before the sun broke over the rooftops. He stood outside the back entrance of the Elm Street location with a clipboard in one hand and a double espresso in the other. The air was damp, the sidewalk still slick from an overnight drizzle. A corporate van idled nearby, its side panel reading Zeller Group, Field Operations. Inside were 2 HR representatives, a kitchen systems trainer, and a veteran general manager from one of the top-performing branches. All of them had been briefed late the night before. At precisely 6:45, the door creaked open. Maria, the line cook he'd assigned to Expo the day before, stepped out and nearly walked into him. She flinched when she saw him. "Didn't expect you here this early," she said, tucking her hands into her hoodie sleeves. "I didn't expect to be," Mason replied. "But that's the problem, isn't it?" Maria gave a slow nod. Her eyes were tired, and her apron was still folded under her arm. "You still want me running Expo? I want you training to manage the kitchen. Starting today." She blinked. "Wait, seriously? You kept your head down and got the work done." "That's the part one can't teach." She studied him for a second, then looked toward the van. "All those suits here to clean house. They're here to help you build something better." As she stepped inside, Elliot jogged up the alley behind the building, his black backpack bouncing against his shoulders. He paused when he saw Mason. "You sleep here or something?" he asked, catching his breath. "Didn't feel right sleeping until this place had a future." Elliot nodded slowly. "I've got the morning prep list. You want me to pull the stock report too? Let's do it together. I want to see what your mornings actually look like." Inside, the restaurant was dim and quiet. The kitchen lights buzzed softly as Maria flipped switches and began checking burners. Elliot moved with practiced rhythm, unlocking the cooler and pulling trays of pre-cut vegetables, bags of pancake mix, and 2 containers of sauce that had clearly been sitting too long. Mason opened one and winced. "How long has this been in rotation?" Elliot sniffed it, then made a face. "Feels like it's been through 3 shifts too many. Dan used to tell us to stretch prep until it was unusable, not unsafe." Mason dropped it into the trash. "That ends now. From today forward, we toss anything that doesn't meet quality." Elliot gave a short nod but didn't say anything. By 7:30, the rest of the corporate team had arrived. One HR rep pulled Dan into the office for a closed-door conversation. Mason didn't need to be in that meeting, he'd already made his decision. Dan emerged 15 minutes later, pale and quiet. Without a word, he gathered his things and walked out. No outbursts, no argument. Just resignation. He knew. Mason stepped into the dining room and found the remaining front-of-house staff standing at the counter. There were only 3. Tasha, a new face named Malik who had just been hired 2 weeks earlier, and Elliot. A 4th person had been scheduled, but they hadn't shown up. "I'll be honest with you," Mason said, resting both hands on the counter. "This store isn't failing because of food or prices. It's failing because people stopped caring. That changes today." Tasha crossed her arms. "So, we're getting replaced too?"
No.
"But if you're here just to collect a check, I'd rather you walk now." She didn't move. Malik looked at the floor. Mason continued. "We're rebuilding from the inside. That means retraining, new systems, and promotions for the ones who've earned them. You'll get support, but you'll also be held accountable." Tasha shifted her weight. "And who's managing the floor?" Mason turned to Elliot.
He is.
"Officially." Malik looked surprised. "Wait, seriously?" "Elliot? He's already been doing it without the title." Elliot looked at the floor and quietly said, "I'll need help." "You'll get it," Mason replied. "Malik, how do you feel about cross-training on bar and host duties?" Malik nodded slowly. "I can do that. I just never got trained on the register." "That gets fixed today." By 9, the restaurant opened for breakfast. Foot traffic was light, mostly regulars. Maria and a temporary kitchen lead from corporate worked the line together, checking every plate before it hit the pass. Elliot kept the floor moving, assigning sections, checking bus bins, and floating between tables. Malik handled to-go orders and greeted walk-ins with a genuine smile, and when he messed up a drink order, he owned it and fixed it without prompting. Tasha stayed mostly quiet. She moved with mechanical precision, but didn't engage with guests. Midway through the shift, Mason pulled her aside. "You've been here a while, right?" he asked. Over a year. Then why do you act like you're already gone? She shrugged. I stopped trying. Every time I picked up extra shifts, worked doubles, did more than I had to, I got nothing. Dan didn't notice. Some of the other servers took tables off my section without asking. At a certain point, you stop caring. Mason nodded. You're not wrong to be frustrated, but you're still responsible for how you show up. You think that changes just because you're here now. I think it changes when people like you decide to either lead or leave. She didn't respond. You've got until the end of the week.
Show me you want to be part of this.
If not, I'll find someone who does. She stared at him, then walked away without a word. By lunchtime, word had gotten around that the owner himself was back on site. A few regulars started poking their heads in. One older gentleman stopped Elliot near the door. You the new manager? Elliot gave a cautious smile. Something like that. Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. Last couple months, this place went downhill fast. Today feels different. Elliot dipped his head in appreciation. Behind them, Malik fumbled a tray, but caught it before it hit the floor. Maria barked a laugh from the kitchen. Better hands than Dan ever had, she said through the pass. By 3, Mason gathered the lean team in the back dining area. Plates were cleared, prep for dinner had begun, and the kitchen was finally quiet. You've all done more in one day than most teams do in a week, Mason said. But this only works if it lasts. Elliot leaned forward. What happens next? We bring in a new general manager. Someone experienced. But they'll report directly to me until this location stabilizes. Tasha spoke up, her voice lower than usual. And us. You'll be given the tools to level up. But that means no coasting. No hiding behind bad leadership. From now on, if someone doesn't pull their weight, they're gone. No warnings. Malik looked toward Elliot. You cool with that? Elliot nodded. I am. As long as we're fair. We will be, Mason said. But we'll also be excellent. He stood and grabbed his coat. Tomorrow, we start the deep dive menu tweaks, service flow, kitchen layout. But for now, go home, rest, and show up ready. As he walked toward the door, Maria called out, You coming back tomorrow? Every day until this place doesn't need me. And with that, he stepped into the fading afternoon light, ready to rebuild what he had almost lost. 2 weeks later, Mason stepped through the front entrance of the Elm Street location just after the lunch rush. The bell above the door gave its usual tired jingle, but the atmosphere inside was different, cleaner lines, sharper focus, and a quiet hum of movement that hadn't existed before. The changes hadn't solved everything overnight, but the difference was unmistakable. He scanned the room. Tables were cleared within minutes of guests leaving. Servers moved with purpose, but not panic, and the new general manager, Renee, stood near the kitchen doors reviewing a clipboard while speaking with Maria. Neither of them noticed him at first, which was just how he wanted it. A hostess approached with a practiced but warm greeting. Welcome in, she said. Just you today? Just me, Mason replied. Corner booth if it's open. Absolutely. Elliot just cleared it. She led him over, set a menu down, and walked off to greet another group that had just come in. Mason settled into the seat and watched. No one hovered. No one stalled at the server station. In fact, there wasn't even a server station anymore. It had been replaced with a mobile drink cart and a small prep counter that kept the floor staff moving instead of hiding behind walls. Elliot appeared a few minutes later, calm but focused. Didn't think you'd come back during a midweek shift, he said, sliding a water onto the table. I wanted to see what this place feels like when no one's expecting me. Elliot tucked his notepad into his apron. Still some bumps. We're short a host for dinner, and one of the new line cooks called out this morning. But Maria's pulling double and Renee's covering the line until 5. No one's drowning, though. Elliot shook his head. Not yet. But we're pacing ourselves. Mason nodded.
Good.
That's all I wanted to see. Elliot paused. Tasha put in her notice yesterday. Said she didn't want to stay if we were going to take the job too seriously. I'm guessing you didn't try to change her mind. There wasn't anything to change. Mason looked out toward the window. A couple sat quietly finishing their meal. Their server, Malik, was folding their check neatly into a small leather folio and thanking them with a nod. Nothing flashy, just enough to feel real. How's Renee holding up? Elliot glanced toward the kitchen. She doesn't miss much. Pulled me aside Monday and told me I delegate too much without checking follow-through. She wasn't wrong. Sounds like you're learning. I'm trying. Mason leaned his arms on the table. That's all I can ask. He picked at the menu, not really interested in eating. He'd had enough of the grilled chicken salad to last a while. Instead, he ordered a coffee and asked if Malik had time to join him for 5 minutes. Elliot gave a nod and disappeared briefly. A few minutes later, Malik approached with a tentative look. He still walked like someone not sure how long they'd be welcome in a place. Mason gestured toward the seat across from him. Take a quick break, he said. You've earned it. Malik eased into the booth. Didn't think I'd be sitting across from you again this soon. You've come a long way in 2 weeks. Malik looked down at his hands. I've worked food service before, but never somewhere that actually noticed when I showed up early. You're noticing things too. Saw you catch that customer's drink order before they even asked. I used to think it didn't matter if I got it right, that people just wanted their food and to be left alone. What changed? Elliot pulled me aside last Friday. Said I reminded him of himself when he first started. Told me to stop waiting for permission to be good at the job. Mason smiled faintly. That's the kind of leadership I hope spreads. Malik nodded, but didn't say anything at first. Then he looked up. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why didn't you just fire everyone and start over? Would have been easier. Mason leaned back in his seat. Because the problem wasn't the people. It was the silence. The kind that builds when no one's watching and no one's listening. I can't fix that with a clean sweep. I can only fix it by showing up and staying present. Malik processed that for a moment, then stood. Thanks for the coffee. Keep doing what you're doing. Mason lingered after Malik left. He watched a mother with a young child take a seat near the window. Maria came out from the kitchen and dropped off their food with a quick wave. The mother smiled, and the child giggled at something on the plate. It looked natural, not staged. The kind of moment that used to happen here before things drifted. Renee came over from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Place is starting to breathe again, she said, nodding toward the dining room. Feels like it, Mason replied. I ran through the numbers from last weekend. We're not back to where we were 6 months ago, but guests are staying longer. Return visits are trending up. Service time? Down by 16%. Kitchen ticket errors have dropped by more than half. And morale? Renee gave a small shrug. Not perfect. But no one's checking out mid-shift anymore. People are staying after to clean without being asked. That counts for something. Mason stood and took one last look around. I'm stepping back after today, he said. You've got this. You sure? I didn't come here to run this place. I came to remember how it was supposed to be run. Renee nodded, then extended her hand. We'll take care of it. Mason shook it firmly. That's all I wanted. He walked out without ceremony, stepping into the late afternoon sun. The sidewalk was busier than it had been his first visit. A couple of people passed him on their way in, chatting about what they planned to order. He didn't turn around. He didn't need to. The work wasn't over, but it had begun. And this time it wouldn't be ignored.